Duke hung for a good long time, but as I noted on our instant analysis, bigger, deeper, stronger, faster, more talented won out in the end. Good game in Tallahassee. Good test for the Noles to take on as they head to Wake Forest. Welcome into Seminoles Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by, everyone, and leave those comments and questions. Consider the super chat to keep us going here at Florida State Live, which we have delivered for you 235 times. Most of those with big game James Coleman here from Den Media Group. And again, it's Den Media Group right here on YouTube, and we will leave that link in the chat as well. James, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Just got done with football practice, and Seminoles are 7-0 for the first time since I've ever been around you, Mark. So I don't really have much to be upset about. Not like much of our fan base. Like, I don't know, we're acting kind of weird right now. It's a little strange position for everybody, but, I'm excited and ecstatic.
Well, not everything can be perfect. So, they and other fan bases need to realize that there are scholarship players that are pretty damn good athletes on the other side. So it's not going to be 50-0 every week. So what seems to be the problem?
When I really listen, it's not just that, it's a lot of fan bases. When I listen to what people say versus what they expect, they've put this narrative in their head and they'll just cement it in their head. So, like, people will say Jordan Travis has regressed. And I don't know if they necessarily know what the word regress, like, and I'm not knocking anybody. I don't think they know the actual definition of regress. They know how to use it in the sentence, but they don't know the definition of it. That means you got worse. But when you show them that up to this point, last year, he's literally gotten better in every statistical category, and we've seen drops, they say, oh, well, it just looks that way. Well, then you ask based upon what? And then what happens is there'll be one or two bad plays, and and that proves your theory. So they stick with it. And I'm like, guys, that's not even it. I do this for a living. And that is just not an enjoyable way to watch football. Football is ebbs and flows. Like you said, the other team has scholarship players too. And it's just sometimes you're running fast and just human makes mistakes. But when you got a quarterback the last two games who's been throwing for over 75% completion rating, he's had 2 interceptions on the entire season. He's one of the best quarterbacks statistically in the nation. And then you look at what's happened with Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix. All of them have had bad games, whereas Jordan Travis has literally been consistent. His worst game was Southern Miss, which we beat like 65-10. And then you hear people talk about our defensive coordinator, fire Coach Fuller because somebody makes one big play. But then you have to remind them, very few teams have scored on us in the second half. And then this statistic came out that shows that quarterbacks' average completion percentage is 50.2%. And there's been 3 passing touchdowns scored on Florida State all year. And you have to tell them, if we fired this guy, he would be hired so fast that it would make your head spin. And it's narratives that we just can't let go. And I'm like, guys, be a fan. We haven't had this for 5 years. Where what's crazy is, Mark, and who would have ever thunk this? Even to the start of Mike Norvell. In theory, there's just as good of a chance that Florida State guarantees themselves a spot in the ACC championship with the victory over Wake Forest as Miami can play themselves into still having an opportunity. Like, the rest of the conference is up in the air. But if Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, like, if they lose, like, for example, if Duke beats Louisville, Florida State, and North Carolina loses, Florida State has guaranteed themselves a shot into the ACC championship. When have we been able to say that in week 8? I don't even know if we could have said that when we won the Natty in 13 or in 14. Guarantee this, if you win this week and you win against Pitt, now it always means something for the Miami game because that's a rivalry game. You literally, if you don't lock it up week 8, you lock it up week 9. And every goal you've had, and that's just it's just wild and amazing to think, people are still like people even had these thoughts. So yeah, it's an amazing season. I've been like I said, or like now it's I-9. I don't know if y'all have I-9 up where you're at, but we have this thing called my son plays in. It's great. It's like YMCA ball, rec ball. Pop Warner. Everybody gets 4 plays. Like everybody has not now it's a Jordan Travis throws the ball to Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson too much. He needs to throw the ball to the freshman that just got here that we didn't even know who he was, if he was ever coming, or if he was real, or these guys like I was like, do you even hear what you're saying? We're throwing to the 2 NFL wide receivers too much. And then when you look at it, and I asked teams, like, I'm not teams, people, do y'all watch other teams? I bet if we looked at Ohio State right now, Marvin Harrison Jr. probably gets a vast majority of the targets and probably another wide receiver. Then everybody else kind of gets him where they're fitted. Nobody has like a team with everybody has 12 receptions. Like that means nobody's good. That means you got a bunch of guys that are okay, but you don't have a number 1 wide receiver. It's just I'm like we're nitpicking about stuff and not learning how to be again 7-0 is very difficult to be, but I guess that's the beauty. I guess that's the new way of the world. We haven't been winning since social media has really taken off. So maybe I got to get used to that.
Yeah, there's something else you brought up there that reminds me of another thing that we hear as the season progresses, and it's worse in college football than any other sport because the best teams only play a handful of games at most that are really challenging games. So you take the top 5, 6 teams in the country, they're playing 3, 4 games at a time where it's okay. Unless they slip up and make it a difficult game, they're going to win by 30, win by 40, win by 30, win by 40. Then we're looking forward to them playing them, and them. And so what we see is that there's this, okay, Florida State opens against LSU. There's all this anticipation. This is an amazing matchup. This is going to prove a lot. We've been waiting for 6, 8 months. LSU's a really good team. Florida State goes out there and not only they don't squeak by with a last-second field goal, they take care of business. And then the response to that by most people, whether they're Florida State fans or just college football fans, is, well, LSU must not be that good. They must not be as good as we thought they were. And then they beat Clemson. Well, they may not be as good as they thought they were. And we also have to consider with Clemson, yeah, Clemson's having a really down year for them. They probably were a better team and more focused and ready to go and at that fever pitch playing Florida State than what we're seeing as the season progresses and their hopes and dreams are being dashed. So there's this where you can't find any good wins in the country because everybody's, well, no, they weren't that good. And so they just discount everybody's wins.
I mean, because like LSU has the number 1 offense in the nation. Yes. Like it's kind of like because now it's well, you beat them in September. It's like, well, that's when we played them. Like, what are we talking about here? Everything has a counter, but again, and it's all emotional responses. It's nothing tangible, like nothing that we can actually argue. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe they are a better team in October, but I don't really know that. People predicted us to lose. So like, I mean, so what are we saying? It's just like Boston College. I mean, Boston College played us tough. I could say at the end of the year that maybe Boston College was a better team than we thought they were. But right now, it's still a game we probably should have blown them out. But I just think it's because people expect blowouts. So like when you had the 13 national championship team, they were just really dominant. They blew everybody out until they met Auburn. And that's when they did. And then 14 was so good that they could spot teams' points and then still come back and be undefeated. But you also had, at that time, one of the better quarterbacks you've ever had in your program history with 3 wide receivers that were over 1,000 yards and a tight end that got drafted. So you had a lot more recruited talent, and as opposed to what we have now, even though these are extremely talented teams. And then when you look at the Duke game, we played extremely sloppy. And I say Virginia Tech, we had times. Syracuse, not really, but people find fault in Syracuse. But you have times where you just see things happen, like a drop ball happens. I told somebody it's hard to go 75% completion on air. Like that means like with nobody covering you. So like you're going to have a drive or two where it kind of stalls out, where it doesn't go. But that's why I've been doing some things more on my channel that I haven't normally done before. I like talking FSU with you. I like talking with Chris with Sporadics, but I haven't necessarily had an FSU just focus on my own channel. And I still don't, but what we do is film breakdowns because I'm learning that a lot of people just truly don't know what they're watching. Now, at the sacrifice of me getting like I can't get paid off of it because ESPN obviously owns the rights and somebody else owns it, but we're going through the condensed version of games. And then tomorrow, which I'm glad we'll have, I think you said we have somebody from Wake on. I want to know about Wake so I can know who I need to watch when I'm watching some of the highlights. So I'll take 4 of the ESPN highlights or the ACC network highlights of Wake Forest. They're all typically about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we'll kind of go over the best defensive plays, the best offensive plays. And I'm going to show people like this is literally how people watch the game who've played the game. And what we're looking for and what should happen and what could happen and how it's supposed to work. And because I really think a lot of people, one, they stop watching it for fun, or you're watching it for fun and then trying to have a take. And I think takes have become so polarizing because of the attention that people get that we just forget that sometimes cats miss the pass because they suck. Or sometimes the offensive lineman missed the block because the guy in front of him was 6'5", 275 and runs a 4.5 and a 40. It's probably going to be a first-round draft pick. Like sometimes, excuse my French, but sometimes shit happens. But sometimes it's all about scheme. So, is like when we watch film and when I started doing this, that's really when I started getting aggravated at narratives. Like people were saying Jay Trav's not attacking the middle of the field. Well, we watch film. And you know what I'm seeing? Jay Trav's attacking in the middle of the field. He's just not throwing it to guys that people want. Because like a post or a slant, that's attacking the middle of the field. But those are the things. But it's fun because we're winning at the end of the day. And that's what I think the big takeaway is, even from the fans' critiques. Like for me, I'm like, all right, we're scoring 30 points. We're averaging 20. I think this season, like 20 plus points per opponent. That's how bad we've beaten everybody. 3 scores is a dominant performance. And we still haven't played our best football. That gives me hope that blowouts are coming, as opposed to me saying, oh, we're not that good, and having to lie about being afraid of Duke, Syracuse. And again, I give Wake Forest respect because they beat us 3 years in a row. So I don't like talking trash about people who got who have the better end of me right now.
A lot of good points there. And we're talking about the film breakdown coming up Thursday night at 7, right?
It'll be, if you're a member of Den Media Group, it'll actually be 11 a.m. There's a link for you to join, but it posts live. Well, not live, but instant premiere on YouTube. It'll post at about at 6 p.m.
Okay. Den Media Group. We'll drop the link in the chat as we do each and every week, folks. And you should be able to find it on your own, but we make it easy for you. We'll put the link in the chat and you track that over to James' channel, Den Media Group, right here on YouTube, 6 p.m. premiere, the Wake Forest breakdown on Thursday. I was going to go into a long story to kind of prove your point, but we'll not go there tonight. Groupthink, yes, is a dangerous thing, and it's people don't think for themselves. And I get it. We can't all know everything and see everything. And so we trust certain people and we start believing the narrative. And many times that's not the case. That's just not the truth and the reality. The thing I'll hit you with, James, is a lot of Florida State fans got all over me. I did an analysis right after the game. And I simply made the statement, and I was very clear about this off the top. Just as I just said off the top of this show, Florida State proved to be deeper, faster, stronger, more talented, all those things, clearly. So I made a comment, though, at one point in the third quarter, I thought if you didn't know who these two teams were, you could say Duke's playing better right now. And my goodness, people just went crazy. So at the point that Riley Leonard gets hurt, even though he's not having a great game, he gets hurt. They're up by a field goal. They're inside the 10. And then the backup quarterback comes back. They take a gamble and risk the throw to the end zone. He misses it, although he's under a lot of duress. So it wasn't a wide open throw. The player was breaking free in the corner, but under duress. And they went for the gamble instead of the 6-point lead, and they come away, and then Florida State just takes off. What was your thought at that point in the game before all that transpired? You know, a lot happened there that changed the momentum about how good Duke is and how Florida State was playing.
Well, what I thought Duke was, and if you've watched any of their film, Duke played, I hate to say, Duke football. Not necessarily, and I understand your statement, so it's not necessarily that I would have thought they were the better team. It's kind of like when you watch a boxer and you hear somebody say, I'm going to make them fight my fight. Boston College did this as well. Slow the game down, use your running game, and make it not a dirty game as like cheating or anything, but just make it an ugly game, make them make mistakes and then capitalize on it. Because that's what Duke did. And they did a great job of that. The first drive, they got a stop on 4th and 1, which probably could have been a better call, but they got the stop on Jordan Travis. And our fans talk about holds, part of the game. It was some bad stuff, but whatever. I'm not going to go that route. Duke scored on the opening possession, a touchdown. After that, they did absolutely nothing else on offense. And that's not me being arrogant. That's just the truth. The other touchdown came from a pick six where Jay Trav, like, he shouldn't have thrown the pass there, but Keon Coleman tries to catch it with his body because he's in traffic, bounces off of his chest right into the hands of a Duke Blue Devil, and he goes in for the score. And then outside of that, everything else was field goals. But when you saw that drive, even like I saw a Duke fan say Florida State purposely tried to hurt Riley Leonard, which that's just fan talk. And my response to him was, maybe so. But if the offensive line would have at least pinched any defensive lineman from Florida State, they wouldn't have had a chance to hit him. And if you watched it, at that point, Florida State's depth was starting to take hold on Duke. Like the line, there was pressure getting there. Like there was a lot of penetration. And Florida State wasn't even really blitzing because that's not really what Florida State does. They play man coverage. Like they knew they didn't have anything to beat the man coverage with Florida State. And I think Leonard is a much more gutsy guy, but he did have better control. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if he makes that throw because they were getting back there, but he has a better chance than that freshman. I would have kicked the field goal. But the freshman also the week before, you know, he made that pass in that amount of yards. He threw a great pop pass to the tight end in the end zone. One of his first plays was a touchdown. Was a touchdown against NC State. So they figured they had the chances. But after that, and seeing what our offense was doing, moving the ball, just stopping themselves, I was like, oh yeah, this is finna get fun real quick. And that it did. And you know, they drove down, scored, stopped them again, drove down, scored again, and that was basically the rest of the game.
So Florida State, 2-touchdown favorite, ends up covering. They take out Duke 38-20. And if anyone wants to discount Duke, man, they took Notre Dame down to the final play. They had a 4th and 16. If they would have been able to get off the field like any reasonable defense typically does about 95% of the time, they win that game. They take out Clemson by 3 touchdowns. I understand, everybody. Clemson's down. I get it. They're still a talented team. There's no doubt about that. They've barely lost all these games, and they're just a good football team. They're not great. They're not super talented, but they're a really good football team. They're probably one of the 20 best teams in America. James, I wanted to hit, you know what comes to mind because I jotted down this name. Kirk Herbstreit made a comment about Wake Forest being a possible upset, putting the Noles on upset alert just because it's going to be a bit of a game in which there's going to be a small crowd, not a big scene at Wake, and so forth and so on. But Herbstreit also made a comment. You mentioned Duke's first touchdown play, the long run. And he was adamant about this. He stated it and restated it about FSU's secondary being lazy on that play. You remember that?
Yeah, I was there at the game, so I didn't hear that, but it was a mistake by Fintrell Cypress. He was in man coverage. You see the guy coming, you have outside contact. It's your job to not necessarily make the tackle, but redirect the guy into the defense where it's flowing. So if he would have just been there off of the edge, that running back runs into probably Kalen DeLoach or scraping Tatum Bethune. And it's probably not a touchdown. But if you watch the play, this is where FSU fans say the hold comes. They also praised the offensive lineman for the block, which was clearly a hold. Again, I always tell people, universal sign of hold is when they do this. That means they know they got caught, and you're about to. And the referee didn't throw the flag, but Kalen spills the puller, keeps his arm free, and tries to turn, and the guy pulls him, which gives him the opportunity to get to the edge. But Fintrell Cypress should have been there. He doesn't do the tackling thing very well, but he covers pretty good. That would be that was the biggest mistake that Florida State made in the passing. And there's a couple other pretty nice sized runs, but that one obviously being a touchdown put Florida State in a bad situation. And I think Duke capitalized on. I'll say this: Duke capitalized on every turnover and downs in the first quarter. So I mean that is what you want from a team. You got to get your points while you can get them. But Kirk definitely wasn't that was definitely that's the first thing I said. I think I tweeted it out before I got some Wi-Fi. I said, man, this was that was awful. That was an awful angle that the cornerback took.
Talking Florida State, they've got a date at Wake Forest. They're 7-0. Of course, as James mentioned, the Demon Deacons have won this matchup 3 consecutive years. They've had more talent and a better team those seasons. We'll talk a little bit more Wake, and we got Tony Siracusa coming on from Last Word on College Football to break down Wake Forest. Tony, how you doing tonight?
Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening. We've got James Coleman's one of our stalwarts here on our Florida State channel. Big Game James.
I know all about Big Game James. It's all good.
James, this is Tony. Tony's phenomenal. Jumps on board with us on a consistent basis to break down college football, and is a voter on how many of these individual postseason awards.
Let's see. The Football Writers Association All-American Team, the Outland Trophy, the Nagurski. I'm being a member of the board of directors of the Football Writers Association. I'm one of the 15 that makes the final vote on those. I'm a panelist on the Bolitnikoff and the Broyles Award for the best assistant coach in the country. And I just got added this year to the Lombardi Award.
Very nice. Well deserved.
Thanks.
Well, James is doing a breakdown on Wake Forest football on his channel coming up on Thursday night.
That should take about 5 minutes.
That's he wants to learn something from you. He wants to get your breakdown in this Wake Forest team that's been so defined by Sam Hartman and really good wide receiver play the last few years.
Sure.
A lot of people, I'll include myself, and I'm supposed to know everything about everyone, but that's impossible. Have lost track of Wake Forest and what's going on there.
Yeah, it's easy to do. It's been easy to lose track of them this year. Because, look, at one point, Dave Clawson even told us, and this was after they had lost 3 in a row. Dave Clawson said, look, you guys were there in fall camp, meaning the reporters. I didn't see this coming. Did you? Now, privately outside the room, a couple of us were like, yeah, I kind of saw a little bit of it coming. Look, the transition from Sam Hartman to Mitch Griffiths has been anything but smooth. And frankly, I think I was on your show before the season started, Mark, and I told you it was not going to be smooth. Mitch Griffiths is 5'10". I think they list him at 5'11", but he's not. He comes with a sidearm 3/4 throwing motion, which when you run the slow mesh offense, and let's be, specific about this, Wake Forest only runs at about 25% of the time. The rest of the time it's an RPO offense. But when you run that slow mesh and you're bringing the quarterback into the line of scrimmage, having a guy who's only 5'10" and throws sidearm, that's not that easy to do. So we assumed that they were going to have to run him more, roll him out of the pocket, throw on the run. The problem has been his decision-making in doing that has been less than adequate. He got yanked at the end of the first quarter of the Virginia Tech game, and they put in backup Michael Kern, and then Kern got hurt with about 4 minutes left in the game and is out for probably another week or two at least. Griffiths didn't play last week in last week's win over Pitt. The explanation from the coaches was he was too injured. He's banged up. He's been taking a beating. Now, this comes right after he was already pulled from the Virginia Tech game, but it did look like it really was a physical issue. I mean, he didn't even suit up. He was in street clothes off to the side with other injured players. So they put in Santino Marucci, the third string quarterback. We don't know who's going to quarterback this week. When I say we, those of us who professionally cover Wake Forest football, we don't know who is going to be the quarterback. So, 30 seconds to learn a little bit about Santino Marucci, or as us other folks of Sicilian heritage would call him, Mooch, because none of us in the neighborhood would call him Marucci. He'd have a nickname. He'd be Mooch. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school a few years ago. However, his performance in training camp behind Hartman, behind Griffiths, behind whomever else was in the quarterback room from one year to the next, had him moved from backup quarterback to running back to safety, back to fullback, and then back to quarterback this year, because they really didn't have a lot else beyond Griffiths and Kern except for some freshmen. And as you know, freshmen do not come in and play in a Dave Clawson setup. They need 2, 3, 4 years to develop before they're ready. So Mooch got his chance. And look, Wake Forest won the game, and he had the game-winning touchdown with, seconds left in the game, a 50-yard drive in 40 seconds. But reality also, and as Dave Clawson said this week, he will always have Pitt. No matter what else happens in this young man's life, he will always have that Pitt game. Reality also says, he had some okay moments and some not so okay moments. At the end of the first quarter, I think he was 204 passing for 26 yards. He had the one touchdown. He had 2 interceptions. One of them almost ended the game in Pitt's favor, but Pitt couldn't move the ball. Pitt's offense was truly that bad. You also look at the circumstances of the win. If you were one of the 20 people who watched any of the highlights of the game afterwards, Pitt was trying to kill the clock. They intercepted a Marucci pass as Wake was going in for a game-winning score. They got flagged for 2 unsportsmanlike penalties on the same play, so they wound up having to start the drive back at their own 7. That, of course, changed the play calling. What you call it the 7 is different than what you're going to call it the 30, right? When you're trying to run out the clock. As they faced a third down, the quarterback, Christian Velu, went into a slide to try and get that first down, but went into a quarterback slide to protect himself. He did it about half a yard short of the first down marker. They measured 4th down. Wake Forest gets the ball on the punt, goes 50 yards in about 40 seconds with a game-winning touchdown pass from Marucci. Dave Clawson was very realistic about the game. I mean, he was thrilled after the game. After you lose 3 in a row, you need that win, right? But he was saying, look, it's a very fine line. Matter of fact, this was his quote from yesterday from the press conference. It's a very fine line, and we were fortunate to be on the right side of it. I've been on the wrong side of it enough times in my career that I don't feel guilty about this one. They were lucky. They got the win, and you celebrated, and you're happy. The defense played really well, and that's one thing that you're going to look for if you're watching this game. Through all of it, even through the losing streaks, Wake Forest defense has kept them in the game every single week. The linebackers are playing exceptionally well. The defensive front is getting a fantastic pass rush, stopping the run very well. Matter of fact, against Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, both losses, the offense scored no touchdowns. All of the scoring came from defensive touchdowns and field goals. The defense is keeping them in the game. So it is that is the strength of Wake Forest right now. If Griffiths is going to play, you know what? Frankly, they're going to have to shrink the playbook a little bit because they asked him to take on the same playbook that Sam Hartman was running, and he's not up to it. Even though this is his 4th year in the program, it's his 1st year as a starter, and he's not into it. He's not capable of it yet. If it's Marucci, you probably got to shrink it even a little bit more, get it down to 7 or 8 offensive plays that he can handle in the limited first team reps that he's taken in the last week and a half or 2 weeks, and see what you get out of it.
I will get out of the way and let you and James learn more about the other respective team.
That's what I was going to ask. So that's a lot of turnover at quarterback. I mean, it is.
It is.
Like, it's funny because while you were talking, I was just typing, just saying something I learned from somebody, and people, and trust me, Wake Forest has us spooked because of definitely the last 3 years.
Sure.
And they're like, well, they still beat us 3 years in a row, and we need to do this, and I'm like, guys, if we lose to a 3rd string quarterback that's played 4 different positions from what it sounds like, I'm going to be very upset. Anything can happen. I said anything can happen. But
sure.
I would probably bet the plane going down, getting in an accident, getting into some other things. And it's not because the guy isn't talented, but how do you run your entire offensive playbook to be able to exploit? Like when you have the whole thing. So have they even been able to kind of exploit some different matchups that they found in Pitt, or what are some of the things that you do see this quarterback that he does well?
Look, if we're going to look at Marucci as the starter, he's got a better arm than Griffiths does. He can throw down. He's bigger, taller, he's more physical. Got a bit of a gunslinger mentality. Frankly, he's not afraid to chuck it downfield and take his chances that his arm strength is going to get it where it needs to be. Wake Forest is, again, this is one of those things of, what could have been or should have been. Wake Forest is missing its best receiver. Donovan Green injured his Achilles in training camp right before the start of the season. And, Jamal Banks is very talented, but if you have 2 of them, if you have Green and you have Banks, it's a different offense. Now you've got Banks and, whoever else you can slot in, and they've moved players from the slot receiver to outside. There's been a lot of adjustments. There's been a lot of movement on the offensive line. But look, we're headed into week 8 of the season. Everybody's banged up. Everybody's moving players around. That's just the reality of the game. But look, I mean, let me tell you what Dave Clawson thinks about this. Saturday after the game, post-game press conference, and we're in there covering it. And he talked about, he had a bunch of family and friends who were in the press conference room. And he said, man, with this win, I'm going to be in a much better mood tonight. I'm going to be able to enjoy the company of my family and friends. And we'll He said, without it, if we lose, I'm up in my room sulking and already thinking about game film the next day. He said, so that's tonight. Sunday, I'll start breaking down the game film. We'll start meeting with players and get to, who missed assignments and what they should have done better. He said, and then by, Tuesday of next week, you guys, meaning the media, will be asking me how I'm going to stop Florida State from scoring 80 points on us. So yesterday at the press conference, me being who I am, I'm not the guy who's going to ask, hey, how's the health of your third string long snapper? Because that's not who our audience is at Last Word. I said, all right, coach, these are my notes from Saturday. You said this, this, and this. So now if we can assume 1 and 2 are true, that you, A, had a good time with your family and friends, B, you got to the game film on Sunday, I'm now here to fulfill the rest of your projection and ask the question, how are you going to stop Florida State from scoring 80 points on you? His answer was, you know what? He just kind of shrugged and he said, they are who they thought, who we thought they would be. They're really good. They're very well coached. They're physical. They don't beat themselves. I mean, he gave tons of credit to Mike Norvell. He said, look, I know he faced a lot of heat from the Florida State faithful. He said, but he said, this team looks like the Florida State of old, the Florida State of the 80s and 90s that was physical and could beat you up and had great talent at the skill positions. He said, and this was a quote from him, he said, I don't know if anybody in the ACC has done a better job of embracing and maximizing what college football looks like in 2023. And he said, and I mean that as a compliment to Norvell, the mix that he has of the recruits and the transfer portal players and how he's gotten that blend out of them. One of the things that impresses Clausen the most was, one, he was saying he doesn't know how Jordan Travis isn't getting more love nationally in the Heisman conversations. But the thing that impresses him the most is the wide receivers, the size and the physicality of these guys. I asked Clausen, I said, look, I watched the Florida State, Duke game, Mark, I record about 17 games every weekend. And I got home from Winston-Salem at about 10:30, turned on one game live on one TV, a recorded game on the other, and just started watching, through the rest of the weekend. And these guys as receivers, I asked Clausen, I said, to me, this is probably one of the best group of receivers in terms of blocking on the edges and blocking on the perimeter that we've seen anywhere in the country. He was in complete agreement. He said, it's kind of easy when you got a receiver who's 6'7", 237 pounds, like Johnny Wilson, or when you got a guy who's Keon Coleman's size. He said in his 10 years as a coach in the ACC, Keon Coleman is as good a receiver as they've ever faced. And he said, so when you got guys that are that size, yeah, they're good blockers. And with that kind of competition in the wide receiver room at Florida State, if you're not blocking during all the reps of practice, you're probably not playing. So they've got that skill. So look, I mean, he knows what he's up against. And his point was, we have to have a high conversion on third downs. We've got to keep our offense on the field. We don't have to have the big chunk plays that we usually want, but we've got to keep moving down the field. We've got to stay ahead of the chains, and we've got to have high third down conversion rate in order to keep the Florida State offense off the field.
I see that Jeff Straley's here doing some advanced scouting for Michigan.
He's got the video camera.
Yeah, Florida State's a possible playoff opponent. So,
but that's when we've struggled. Duke did that. Duke, Boston College, right. Syracuse attempted to do it. It didn't work out for them very well because we came out really, really hot. Right. Keep using all your downs. Really does help. But from what you said is basically an accurate breakdown of what Florida State is. They do have really when I watched the last game, it is actually amazing watching Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson block. Like they really enjoy blocking. And then you got Jaheim Bell, who's a tight end, but he's basically another blocking wide receiver that's out there. They do though tend to make what's frustrating is the mistake, the correctable mistakes that Florida State will make over time. Not just the drop passes; those are the ones that are easy to diagnose. Now, does Wake still run a 3-down, or are they a 4-down front?
They primarily run a 3-down, but they have gone to because they'll use a nickel back. But they have gone down. They have gone to a 4-down periodically this season. They do have good edge rushers, on the line. The linebacking core, the two linebackers that they've had have proven, Jacob Roberts and Dylan Hazen, have had outstanding seasons. I mean, that has been the strength of the defense. The defensive backs have improved. They have not given up the big plays. Last year, they were getting beat over the top far too frequently. And Clausen talked about it a lot at the end of the season. They have made it a thing where instead of playing it safe and getting beat, they're being a lot more aggressive. Now, that sounds counterintuitive, because if you're aggressive and you miss, you're giving up a big play. They're being aggressive and really not missing. I mean, they've given up, the defensive backs have given up maybe 2 big plays, in the last 4 games. They're keeping everything in front of them and being aggressive and attacking the receivers a lot more. Now, again, it's easy to attack the receivers when they're not 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". It's a lot easier. They have not faced a group of physical receivers like Florida State has. But it is definitely a different mindset that they're getting out of the defensive backs this season.
Okay, so aggressive defense and obviously going to be well coached, because that's what Dave Clawson does do a good job of having guys. I hate the well coached, because it's not well coached that they don't get penalized. I joke with people, say, if you go look at the most penalized teams in the nation, and then go look at the top 15, and there's probably going to be a lot of similarities to it. But when I say well coached, meaning even if they're outmanned physically, these guys are going to be where they're supposed to be at, and that says a lot for a well coached team. So that's
I think
the 3-down.
I think with the defense was Clausen and Brad Lambert. He brought Brad Lambert in from Purdue as his defensive coordinator last year. And so now in year 2, I think these players are much more well-versed in the schemes that Lambert brought. And Glenn Spencer, the linebacker coach that he brought in, the players seem to, have a better understanding, like you were saying, where you're supposed to be, not just reacting, but, thinking ahead of where the play is going. So, they haven't been gashed a lot for big plays on defense the way they were last year.
What would you consider the strength of the defense to be?
I would really consider it to be the linebacking group right now, the tackling in the linebacking group. They're blowing up plays within the first 3 to 4 yards. Running plays are not getting big yards past the point of contact. You're not getting past linebackers and picking up another 4 or 5 yards. They're ending the play at contact. And so, they're shutting down running games pretty effectively.
Okay. I know Florida State's the last couple games has struggled against the 3-down front a little bit. It's not a struggle, but it's just with the 3-down front being able to bring that extra man or 2 from anywhere.
Yep.
When you're pulling linemen and you're doing a lot of stuff, it gets a little, people get lost. I know it's frustrated our fans with the run game, because we do a lot of people call it the counter for some reason, but it's not a counter. We used to call it the power G concept. Basically, you're running off tackle and you're pulling two linemen. It's a little slower developing, but it's like more physical. But that guard, if they're slanting and there's nobody immediately there, now you're looking around, and the next thing you know, a linebacker undercuts them. So just little silly. That's what I was saying. Like some of the simple things that Florida State should be able to do don't get done well sometimes, especially early on in games. And if they're able to capitalize and do some things, but it sounds like that's going to be a tough road to hoe without having one of your. I was going to ask you. So is Green? That was one of the 6'5" guys. If I remember,
Donovan Green, and it's really unfortunate with what this guy has gone through. He missed the season 2 years ago when he blew out his knee. Worked really hard, worked on his physical conditioning, his upper body strength. Came back last year and had a really good year. He was, for all intents and purposes, the number 2 receiver behind A.T. Perry. But really very physically gifted and could go one-on-one with really any defensive back, and really did a great job of securing those 50-50 balls because he could use his physical size. And right towards really probably the last week or two of camp, he took out his Achilles in really, I guess, mostly a non-contact drill, came down on top of someone's foot. And the way his ankle turned and his foot turned, it tore his Achilles. And so, they originally said 10 to 12 weeks, but, that's out for the season. So they have missed him. And they've got a good receiving group, but, no team is going to lose their number 1 receiver and be the same. I don't care what team it is. When you take a hit on your depth at a critical position like that, especially as you're bringing in a new quarterback, and those physically skilled and experienced receivers are almost like the safety blanket for that new quarterback, and then you take one of them away, it's definitely had an impact on the offense.
I see Wake is 74th in total defense. If you look at yards per play, 57th rushing. James,
it's an improvement over. It's an improvement over what it's been in past years.
And when you're on the field quite a bit, that becomes difficult, obviously, to hold up late.
No, you know what? I mean, that's a great point, Mark, because when you're doing your job, and the offense is 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, sooner or later, something's going to give on the defense. They're not going to be able to hold that up for the entire game. And the Georgia Tech game in particular, the Clemson game in particular, a lot of, 3 and outs out of Mitch Griffiths and the offense. Throws that just had you scratching your head, wondering what he was seeing because it was different than what everybody else was seeing. Part of the challenge with Mitch was, and will continue to be if he plays this weekend, trying to make up for what he did wrong the previous play, the previous series. He puts a lot on his shoulders in terms of trying to undo the mistake that was done. And, that generally tends to lead to more mistakes.
We only have a couple of minutes, but as James was saying, when we were looking at the Duke game, that at one point, mid-third quarter, Riley Leonard's still in the game. Duke's at the 10-yard line. They get a 3-point lead. They're looking to extend it to 2 scores. That's when he gets knocked out of the game. And James explaining, hey, Duke was playing Duke football. They muddied up the game. They dirtied up the game. And if they dirtied up the game, and they're probably one of the 20 best teams in the country, Wake is really going to have to dirty up this game. I'm guessing this is going to have to be like, we squeeze the air out of the ball, we play field position, and we hope we can come up with some kind of, I don't know where they're going to come up with offense. I'm trying to find where they're going to generate offense.
They had their best running game of the season against Pitt. About 150 plus yards rushing. Damon Claiborne had 2 significant touchdown runs. One of the things the Wake Forest was lacking all last season, which Clausen made a point of emphasis this year, was the explosive plays in the running game. He said, our running backs are doing a great job getting that 4 or 5 yards. I need to see the 10, 20, 30 yards that comes after that when you get to the second level. It's been lacking most of the season up until the Pitt game. I will also say Pat Narduzzi's defense wasn't even close to what we're used to seeing out of a Pat Narduzzi defense. Not even close to the skill level that he's used to coaching there. That's not a knock on what the Wake Forest running backs did. That's just the reality of what they were facing. It's going to be different with Florida State.
All right, guys. Anything else?
You tell me.
Tony, we appreciate you being here.
Of course. Always glad to do it, guys.
Last word on college football, everyone. Anything in particular you want to highlight there?
Hey, we have our weekly Heisman poll coming out tomorrow. So, all 30 writers take part in that. And we've got our new poll coming out. It's not going to surprise anybody that Michael Penix Jr. is still number one. But I think you're gonna see some votes in there for one Mr. Jordan Travis also.
Yeah, if anyone's listening to you.
Question about that, because I like my one. I always tell people I've known him. I know his high school coach, Tampa Bay Tech High School. Jason Roberts grew up with him. Why does it seem that Jordan Travis? I'm not saying this as a complaint, but he's just consistent, right? Consistently who he is. But we've seen Caleb Williams go from here to down, and Michael Penix did not win that last game for him. I could argue that he might have lost him the game. Like, right. What goes into the voting for that, and like what make him still the top overall guy? I'm just curious because I'm not a voter. I'm always
Hey, look, I mean, one, Caleb Williams came off my ballot completely. We each picked the top 5. It's a weighted vote, and we picked the top 5. Caleb Williams came off my ballot completely after that performance. Michael Penix, he didn't have a great game, but I still look at the body of work overall for the season, and I mean, to me, he's the best quarterback in the country. He, like Jordan Travis, is blessed with a great receiving group at Washington. But, I think what happens is Travis doesn't put up the flashy numbers, so he's not jumping out on the stat sheet. But again, for someone like me who looks at the body of work, I think he's worthy of being top 3 right now.
That's fair.
For me, it's 3 things that stand out, and I'm not saying that this is justified, but 3 things stand out to people when it comes to Heisman voting, and you can look through history. Number 1 is obviously the team has to win, and if they don't win, you've got to be RG3. Let's say in 2011, you go 8-4, but you're just so ridiculously good and putting up crazy video game kind of numbers. So number 1, the team's got to win and be in contention. Number 2, you got to put up stats. And then number 3, at some point in the season, there's got to be something that sticks in people's memories, like, 75-yard drive with a minute left on the clock that pulls out a game against a rival, or just a crazy electrifying play that sticks in
your
people's
Heisman
minds.
moment.
Yeah, something memorable has to come.
Yeah, I don't know that Penix has had that moment, but he's had that game.
Oregon.
You look at what he did in the Oregon game, and it wasn't a moment. It was the entire game. Man, he looked fantastic running that offense. And, I against a, another top 10 opponent. And I think that weighs into it also. He wasn't doing it against Arizona State. He was doing it against Oregon. So I think that weighs into it. Like I said, I look at the whole body of work, and Travis has had a very good season. Not flashy, but good, consistent. He's not beating himself. There aren't the turnovers and not the interceptions. So it's definitely worthy of that. I just think when I look at total yardage, yards per game, things like that, Penix is still my guy right now until proven otherwise.
Tony, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Glad to do it, guys. Be well.
James, you made our show tonight. You always make our show. So I know that you got a ton going on, and you could be 18 different places. So thank you for making it tonight and delivering.
Oh, no problem, man. I try to make it unless I have something going on. And unfortunately, the last couple of weeks have been pretty crazy. I don't know. Did you see me Me and my guy made ESPN.
I did
Jack
not see
Coleman.
that.
Yeah, we had a young man go to the Duke game. He's the real reason we beat Duke. What people don't know is that Jack Coleman is a kid who had a tumor. He had a tumor behind his brain. He had a tumor. They had radiation. The treatment has basically rendered him blind. I think in his left eye, he has about 5 feet of visibility that he can see. And he's a diehard FSU fan. So I brought him to the game. We did a lot of stuff. He was in the stands, and we were playing real sloppy. So I just said, and then Holly Rowe wanted to interview him anyway. So I just said, you know what? You're going to come down here with me. We're going to hang out on the sideline. And when he got to the sideline, that's when we started with it. So things started going. So I had so Duke fans don't think it's Riley Leonard that getting hurt that lost you. It's really me bringing Jack Coleman down to watch the game from the sideline. That was really what that was the spark that the catalyst moment. But that was one of the cool things. One of the blessings that I've been able to do in my career is be able to, create some really dope ass experiences for people who are kind of down on their luck or some things have happened. So I was, that's really what I've been doing. So really, if anybody wants to know about it, you can go at Den Media Group. If you check out one of our, I think it's folders or whatever, but it says MFTK Jack's Dream. And you can see how the dream started, learn about that. And we got different clips going throughout the whole process. It'll eventually be about 2 15-minute shows. But right now you've got the clip of me and him drinking Powerade fresh from the source at the game, us meeting the athletic director, doing a whole bunch of other different stuff. And it will be ESPN is doing their own thing, and it'll air, I believe, during ACC Championship weekend. So hopefully Florida State will be there.
All right. We'll be looking out for that. That's awesome. All right, James. Thanks for everything.
All right, brother.
Have a good week.
It was well.
We're going to do Miami, folks. So join us there. We are headed directly there. Miami with Cam Underwood, State of the U. So join us there.